If I had to pin down the one thing that separates the high performers from all the rest of us, it's the way they view the movement of their money. Now, most of us are going to look at debt as a moral failure or a heavy weight. But if you want to be successful in this 2026 economy, you got to realize that debt is just a simple math error, and it's a leak in your gas tank that's wasting all your fuel. So with the release of the One Big Beautiful Bill, the government is now tracking every transaction over $600 with surgical precision. As an analyst, we can use that data to our advantage. We also have Section 402-A, which allows for tax neutral overtime. So that means that for the first time in history, your extra labor can be converted directly into debt payoff without the government taking a 25 or 30% cut. Now, if you're still following middle-class advice like Dave Ramsey's snowball method, you're trying to win a race in an old car while everyone else is in a modern sports car. Now, that method still works, but sometimes it doesn't totally tailor into our lifestyle right now. So today, we're gonna break down the debt velocity method. We're gonna treat your finances like a high-performance engine, and we're gonna identify the leaks, clean out the clutter, and go from just trying to keep your head slightly above water to actually getting ahead in life. The core message today is simple. Your money is currently moving away from you, but we're gonna flip that direction and increase the speed. Before we can increase the speed, we gotta look at the hardware. In financial terms, your hardware is your balance sheet. And right now, most of you have a massive leak in your system that you're not even measuring. Let's talk about this toxic yield audit. The first thing you need to understand is that the numbers you see on your monthly statements are just all lies. They're designed to understand the cost of your debt. Now, banks want you to think in terms of annual percentage rate because a yearly number feels far away. But the thing is, with your debt, it doesn't grow annually. It grows every single day, even while you sleep. So I want you guys to take a look at one thing, and it's your daily cost. Every 14 hours, the bank takes a cut of your balance. Now, here's a real world example. Imagine you have a $20,000 balance on a credit card at 29% interest rate. The headline says you owe a minimum payment, but the reality is that you're probably losing about $16 a day. And now that's $16 of your hard-earned money being vaporized before you even wake up and have your first cup of coffee. If any of your accounts are costing you more than $2 a day, that is why we call it the toxic yield. It's because you're currently a cash cow for the bank and you're the one paying for their office towers and their private jets. Now, our first goal of this is to flip that script and stop being their paycheck. Now, you might be thinking, Kyle, I don't have time to go through every single receipt. Well, you really shouldn't, and it's a waste of your brain power. Under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, every financial institution is now required to provide machine-readable data. I want you to imagine a script running in the background of your life. You can now use AI-driven auditing tools to scan your statements for ghost fees. And what these are just tiny $5 or $10 charges that the banks hide in the fine print. Individually, they look really small, but collectively, they're representing a significant hidden leak. And I watched a friend of mine realize he was losing $400 a month just to automated service fees he never agreed to. You can use these AI tools to flag these. Then once you're able to find them, you can use Section 102 of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act to demand a complete reversal. Remember, it's your data, start using it. If your money is leaking out in small drips, you'll never have enough pressure to move forward. We also have to talk about the silent killer of today, which is the buy now and pay later services. What these are is essentially having a messy junk drawer where you can't find anything because services like Affirm and Klarna have made it so easy just to buy a $100 pair of shoes for just 4 easy payments. What they're actually doing is creating dozens of tiny automated payments that clutter your whole monthly budget. So when you have 40 different $15 payments hitting your account at random intervals, you lose the ability to see the total weight of what you owe, and your account looks like a whole mess. It's like trying to balance a checkbook with 1,000 tiny holes in it. You need to actively map these out, total out the principal, and clean out all the clutter. And if you're able to, pay them all off in one shot just to simplify your life and clean out your list. Just know this, you can't build speed when your focus is fragmented into 100 directions. And I want to share something with you that the banks don't want you to know. These days, banks aren't just using old school credit scores. They're using AI to predict when you're about to hit a financial wall. They look at your overall spending patterns and how often you check your bank app. And they even take a look at the time of the day you make these purchases. Now, once their AI model sees that you're struggling, they're not going to lower your rate. They're actually going to increase their service fees, because on their end, their math says you're less likely to notice or fight back on any of this. They are betting on your brain fog. The only way to win is to be much more intentional than their algorithm. What I'm trying to say is you got to stop reacting to their app notifications and start following your own plan. This is about taking the steering wheel back from the bank's autopilot. So that's the hardware update. And once that is finally audited, we need to update your rules completely. We're going to change the logic of how money moves through your life. Now, one of the biggest errors I see is the delay between receiving money and using it. Most people get paid into a checking account and they just let it sit there for 10 days and they pay their bills. In that time, that money is subject to your emotions, meaning you see the balance and you think, I can probably afford a nice dinner tonight. What I want to introduce is a 1099-K direct link protocol. Now, with this protocol, if you have any extra income, whether it's from consulting, selling items online, or having a small business, you can route it directly back into a separate payoff account, and it never touches your main account. So it never ends up entering your spending pile. Now, why would we do this? Well, this is where section 402-A comes in. In this April 2026 tax cycle, any income earned through tax natural overtime is going to be your strategic weapon, because the government isn't going to take their cut. That dollar has 30% more power than a standard dollar. So if you earn $1,000 in overtime, you apply $1,000 to the debt. And now you're essentially using the government's own rules against them to speed up your debt destruction. Now, we also have to account for the real cost of debt on your health, because every hour you spend worrying about your debt is an hour your brain is not focused on earning more money. And we gotta admit it, debt creates stress. If a specific debt is making you lose sleep, then it's just slowing you down. I like to think of our brains like a computer processor. If 20% of your mental energy is spent on debt worry, you only have 80% left for your whole career, your family, and your life. Even if the math says you should pay off a different card first, sometimes we allow for a reset. This means paying off a small annoying debt just to clear your head. So this really isn't about the math, it's really about getting your mind back to where you can actually produce results, because clarity can then equal speed. Now let's get into some of the behavioral engineering for these concepts. The reason most people fail isn't because they lack a plan. It's because they hit a wall of decision fatigue. Every time you have to choose to pay a bill, you're using limited supply of willpower. A neat trick I learned is to install a psychological kill switch. This means you gotta automate every single decision, because nowadays we have tools that can auto sweep your accounts every Friday. So if you leave a decision to yourself on a Friday night when you're exhausted, tired, don't wanna do anything, then you're gonna make the wrong decision. It's best to remove these human errors and features from your entire loop, because if the money is gone before you can even think about spending it, the decision never happened. And you're technically not really being disciplined here, you're just automating everything. And I believe automation is the only way to maintain consistent velocity. Now let's move into what can we do and what are the smart moves next. This is the part where we increase the speed of your money through something called the interest arbitrage. I want you to imagine you're holding $10,000 in a savings account, earning just a little bit of interest. Now this is typically the safe move, but at the same time you have $10,000 in a credit card debt at a much higher rate. Now what you're doing is you're essentially paying the bank for the privilege of holding your own money. It's like working a job where you have to pay your boss for every hour you stay there. Now, unless that cash is your absolute emergency fund, it's gonna be considered wasted capital. Every dollar you keep in a safe savings while carrying high interest debt is a dollar you're using to fund the bank's success instead of your own. You need to stop looking at what you're earning and start looking at the gap between what you make and what you pay. Now, if that gap is negative, this is where I want to show you the velocity versus snowball effect. Now, the debt snowball effect is a great psychological move. It's for people who need the small wins just to stay motivated. And it tells you to pay the smallest balance first. But thinking about this concept, it's kind of like putting out a candle when your curtains are on fire. In order to correct this, we got to focus on the monthly cash flow. We want to put your money where it does the most damage to the debt while freeing up the most cash. And we look for all the clogs in our system. So if a debt has a high monthly payment compared to the total balance, that's a clog in your system. And by killing that specific debt first, you unlock a massive chunk of extra cash every single month. And now you can use that extra fuel to blast through the next target. And this is how you start creating the momentum. The goal isn't small wins. The goal is maximum force. You also need to realize that these banks have a budget to keep you as a customer. In this 2026 market, it costs a bank $1,200 just to find a new customer. And they're terrified of you leaving. Now, it would be better for you to just call them up, demand a better deal, don't ask for a favor. Don't be polite even. You can even write out a script, use it like, hey, I'm reviewing my finances. It looks like your current interest rates is too high compared to what I can get anywhere else in 2026. I'm prepared to move my balance unless we can lower this rate. Now, if they say no, call their bluff, ask for the account closing department. And that's where the real power lives. Because once you get to that department, all you gotta say is, I'm aware of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act mandates regarding the competitive rate matching, and I'd like to see if I can qualify for a rate adjustment before I even finalize this offer. And they have the special permissions to lower your rate. You just gotta ask right away. And every percent you shave off is more speed for your money. Now, this is the final stage we'll talk about. This is where you go from being a borrower to being an owner. This is something I like to call the refund kill shot. Now, as we sit here in April 2026, many of you are looking at tax refunds or even bonuses. And most people think they should reward themselves with a vacation or maybe put a down payment on a new car. And that's where you're gonna make a mistake. You're gonna wanna use this money for a kill shot. And what that means is using a single payment that completely wipes out a debt. Now, the reason this is so powerful is because it creates an immediate cash surge. So if you kill a $300 a month payment, you just gave yourself a $3,600 a year raise. Now, you didn't have to work harder and you didn't have to ask for any promotion, but you just fixed the direction of your money. And this takes a more offensive pivot and wealth migration step. The most common failure is stopping once the debt is gone. People get to zero and then they just let their cash sit around, which is gonna be a waste of your momentum. Now, the moment a debt is paid off, you gotta be able to seize that moment and redirect that same exact payment into some sort of investment. So if you were paying $1,000 a month into a sum loan, you can now pay $1,000 a month into an index fund. And you're already used to not having that $1,000 every month. So don't let yourself start spending. Move the money before your habits can even change. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Once you start betting on black and start investing, you gotta apply that same velocity logic to all your investments. Now, most people just buy and hold and just hope for the best. But these days, we gotta look at an asset velocity. If you have money sitting on a fund that is only returning 6%, while there are plenty of opportunities for 12%, now you've created a new kind of math error for yourself. You aren't losing to a bank anymore at least, but you're losing to the opportunity cost. You need to keep that money moving. The second it stops working hard for you, it starts losing value. And remember, wealth is a game of movement, not just accumulation. Once the debt is gone, your new job is to make sure it never comes back. This economy nowadays is more volatile than ever. You need something called a system redundancy. Now, this isn't just a savings account, but it's a layered defense. You need liquid cash for emergencies, but you also need lines of credit that are pre-approved at 0%. Now, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act made these emergency lines easier to get for people with zero debt. So you're gonna wanna get out there, secure them now while you don't need them. That way, if a real crisis hits, you aren't forced back into high interest traps. And I know what you're thinking, Kyle, this sounds great, but does it actually work in the real world today? Well, let's address the most common pushbacks I get when I present this method. Isn't it risky to put all my cash toward debt instead of an emergency fund? Listen, I'm not saying you shouldn't have some sort of buffer here, but if you have $5,000 in the bank account and $5,000 in credit card debt, you don't have an emergency fund. You have a $5,000 loan from yourself at a 25% interest rate. And under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, you can often get a zero interest emergency line of credit once your balances are cleared. But the real risk is staying in high interest debt that drains your fuel every single day. Now, a second question I normally get is, what if I can't get any overtime to use for Section 402-A. Well, this section doesn't just apply to your standard hourly overtime. It applies to performance bonuses, side income, and even certain types of digital sales. So if your primary job isn't offering overtime, you should start looking at some sort of side hustle. And in 2026, the barriers to starting a digital service are $0. The point of this is to find capital the government hasn't touched yet and deploy it before they can. Now here's another question. Is it worth the time to call the banks for a lower rate? Well, yeah, let's take a look at the math. If a 15-minute phone call lowers your interest rate by just 3% and you have a $10,000 balance, you just earned $300. And I don't know about you, but I'll pick up the phone for 15 minutes just to save $300 every single time. Now, I view your financial life like an engine. For years, you've been running with too many things slowing you down. Your stress levels are high and you aren't getting anywhere because of your old habits. Think of it like driving your car with the emergency brake halfway up. You can floor it all you want, you can buy a bigger engine, and you can try to drive faster, but you're just burning out your tires and wasting gas. The winners in 2026 aren't the ones trying to out-earn their mistakes by working harder. They're the ones who realize they just need to put the brake down. Now, every dollar you earn is like fuel in the tank. And if you're letting high interest leak that fuel into the payment before it even hits the engine, you're never going to get where you're going. Try to imagine having debt as having a massive hole in your bucket while you're trying to fill up a pool. You can keep pouring in water all day long, but most of it is just going to get soaked into the ground. Now we can utilize these tools like the Section 402-A, but the only thing left to do is to actually follow the plan. Don't wait for any motivation, you just need to get started. So I want you to start cleaning out your clutter, change your rules, and speed everything up. And if you appreciated this advice and a different look at debt, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and I'll see you guys on the next one.